Iman, faith, it starts from your heart, right? If your heart has a connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then you will follow along the path that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has laid out for you. And if your heart has a connection with the sunnah of the Prophet of the Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, then the actions that you carry out will follow along the sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And again, if your heart has a connection to the path of the Salaf, then your actions will follow the manhaj of the Salaf as-Salih. And on the flip side, right? If your heart has a connection with stuff in this dunya, if your heart has a connection with, let's say women, let's say video games, let's say drugs, then your actions are going to follow those things, right? You're going to chase those things. And if your heart has a connection to bid'ah, innovation, then you will follow along the path of bid'ah, even if your mind knows it's wrong. Even if your mind knows it's wrong, you have to feel it inside your heart, right? Because the mind can know one thing, but the heart can feel another. And this was the problem of the Quraysh, right? They knew, le Quraysh savait que l'islam était le haq. Ils savaient que c'était la vérité. Mais il y avait la fierté dans le cœur. Il y avait de l'arrogance parmi eux. Ils voulaient pas lâcher la religion de leurs parents, de leurs grands-parents, de leurs ancêtres. Et pour cette raison, même s'ils savaient que l'islam était le haq, ils l'ont jamais accepté. They never accepted Islam, even though they knew. Because of pride, because of arrogance, because they did not want to leave the religion of their forefathers. And look at their state now. Regardez-leur maintenant. La façon de laquelle on parle de eux autres. Les ennemis de l'islam. Abu Huraira radiallahu anhu, he narrates that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he said, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He does not look at your faces or your wealth. He does not look at your faces or your wealth, but He looks at your heart and your deeds. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, il va pas regarder vos visages et l'argent que vous avez, mais il va regarder votre cœur et les actions que vous avez faites. Donc les gars, le cœur, c'est un aspect central dans l'islam. Le cœur, c'est quelque chose qu'il faut protéger. Et Shaitan le sait. Shaitan sait que l'islam est basé dans le cœur d'un musulman. Et pour cette raison-là, Shaitan va l'attaquer. Shaitan connaît le Sirat al-Mustaqim plus que nous autres. Il l'a vécu. Il a vu Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Il était parmi les anges. Il le sait. Il sait comment nous pousser sur le mauvais chemin. Et il sait que ça commence avec le cœur. Donc, si notre ennemi sait qu'est-ce qu'il faut attaquer, nous, on doit faire quoi? What do we have to do? On se défend. Right? Si quelqu'un veut nous attaquer, on se défend. On se protège. Donc, au fil des 2 prochaines semaines, je vais faire une série à propos de protéger le cœur d'un musulman. Protéger votre cœur à vous autres des attaques du shaitan. Abu Huraira radiallahu anhu, he also narrated that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, when a slave of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commits a sin, a black spot appears on his heart. And if he repents or he abstains from this sin, so if he refrains from it, seeks forgiveness or repents, then that black spot is wiped clean. It's polished clean. That black spot disappears from your heart. But if he continues to do it, then those black spots will get multiplied and they will grow until they cover your entire heart. And then your heart is black and your heart is darkened and your heart is hard. So think about yourself. Pensez à vous-même. Arrêtez 2 secondes. Tout ce que vous faisiez, whatever you're thinking about right now, stop for 2 seconds and think about the sins you do in your life. Right? We all have a sin that we repeat, right? A mistake that we do, a mistake that we hate ourselves for maybe, something that we wish we could stop but we can't. Something that, as hard as we try to stop, we can't. Something you're addicted to, something that you yourself you're ashamed of, something that nobody may know about. Everybody has it, and some it's going to be something major, some it's going to be something minor. But everybody, every single Muslim has something that they could work on. But if you keep falling into that sin over and over and over and over and over and over again, then your heart's going to get black and your heart's going to get darkened. And this doesn't just affect that part of your life. It affects the rest of your life. One minor sin that you repeat over and over and over again can slip into your salah, can slip into your fasting. You know? This stuff can affect more than just what it's affecting in that moment. Say you spend 30 minutes doing a sin. Say you spend 10 seconds doing a sin. That sin doesn't end there unless you ask for repentance, unless you ask for forgiveness. Look at some of the guys we look up to, right? Look at some of the guys who have given halaqas. Some of the guys that you see on your YouTube, on your TikToks, Instagram, whatever. You know, les gars comme Abu Taymiyyah, les gars comme Akhi Ayman. These guys have been through it, right? Ils ont vécu l'autre côté de l'islam. Pas de l'islam, ils ont vécu l'autre côté de la vie. Ils ont vécu l'autre côté de la vie avant qu'ils soient revenus à l'islam. Et ils ont perdu des affaires. Ils ont perdu des affaires qu'ils vont plus jamais avoir dans leur vie. Ils ont perdu des relations. Ils se sont fait blesser. Ils ont perdu des amis qui sont morts. Ils ont passé des années en prison. Right? Ces gars-là, ils ont vécu ça. Et il y a des gars parmi nous qui veulent vivre cette vie. Et pourquoi ils veulent vivre cette vie? Parce que le cœur, il est dur. Because the heart is black and it is away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But if you make an effort to bring your heart closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then these desires to be like a rakai, to be un gars du hood, these desires, they won't be there anymore. Ces désirs vont pas être là si vous faites un effort pour vous rapprocher de Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala et si vous faites un effort de vous protéger contre Shaitan. So, Imam Ghazali, il donne une analogie pour le cœur. Et cette analogie a été apprise au fil des années par plusieurs savants de Ahlus Sunnah wal Jama'a, incluant Ibn Qayyim, rahmatullahi alayh. L'analogie, c'est que le cœur, c'est comme une forteresse ou comme un château. Et à un château, à une forteresse, il y a des entrées, right? Donc quand on est à la guerre, quand dans le temps vous êtes à la guerre, pour que la forteresse soit sécure, soit protégée, il faut protéger les entrées à ce château, right? S'il y a 4 portes, je vais protéger les 4 portes, right? Parce que c'est les entrées, c'est là mes points vulnérables. And your heart is like that. Your heart has doorways. Your heart has entrances that Shaitan is going to try and exploit. Right? Your heart has entrances that Shaitan is going to try and exploit. And how do you prevent this? How do you prevent Shaitan from exploiting the entrances to your heart? That's by knowing what the entrances are. Ça commence avec le knowledge. Ça commence avec l'ilm. Ça commence avec les connaissances. Parce que si vous savez pas c'est quoi qu'il faut protéger, comment vous allez le protéger? How are you going to protect yourself when you don't know what needs protecting, when you don't know what you're vulnerable from, when you don't know when you are vulnerable or how you are vulnerable? So the scholars, they say that protecting your heart is wajib upon every Muslim. It's an obligation upon a Muslim to protect his heart. Because if you do not protect your heart, where's that going to lead? Right? It's going to lead to sin. It's going to lead maybe even further. But if you don't protect your heart, you're not in good shape. So the scholars, they say that it is wajib on a Muslim to protect your heart. But when something is wajib upon a Muslim, then the knowledge that they must have to do that thing also becomes wajib on them. Right? Salah is mandatory upon all of us. So learning how to pray is mandatory upon all of us. You guys with me? So Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah rahmatullahi alayh, he says, what can my enemies do to me? What can my enemies do to me? My paradise is my heart. It is with me wherever I go. To imprison me is to put me in seclusion. To send me into exile is to lead me onto the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And to kill me is to make me a martyr. So his heart, the heart of this Imam, was pure. It was pure. It was protected from the thoughts of shaitan, from the waswas of shaitan, from the attacks of shaitan. Right? So if your heart is pure, then your Islam will follow through it in all aspects of your life. Peu importe vous allez où, si votre cœur est pur, votre Islam va suivre. Et vous n'allez jamais être tout seul. Vous n'allez jamais être tout seul. Les imams, quand ils ont passé du temps en prison, ils se sentaient pas seuls. They knew, ils savaient qu'ils avaient Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala avec eux autres, de leur côté. Parce que ce qu'ils faisaient était bien. Leur cœur était pur, ils étaient là pour des raisons qui étaient basées dans l'islam. Because they defended their religion, they were there. They knew Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was with them when they were alone. He was with them in seclusion, and so they did not feel alone. But if your heart is dark, if your heart is black, then even when you're in company with so many of your brothers, then you're gonna feel alone. Right? And I'm sure a lot of us have felt this way in our lives. Right? Even when you're surrounded by your brothers, even when you're surrounded by, les gars de l'école, your friends, whatever, you feel alone. You don't feel like you belong. You don't feel good with them. Right? And a lot of that comes from your heart not being pure. And I'm not saying when something's bad is going on and you don't feel like being there. But if you're sitting in a halaqa and you feel alone, you feel like you're distant from everybody, one thing to look at is your heart, is your connection to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So to conclude today's halaqah, I wanted to share a few ayah from Surah Al-Qiyamah. Truly, you people love a fleeting world. You people love a fleeting world and neglect the life to come and neglect the day of judgment. On that day, there will be radiant faces. So faces that are bright, that are happy, looking towards their Lord, looking towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And on that day, there will be sad and despairing faces of those who realize that a great calamity is about to befall them. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us from the punishments of the grave, from the punishments of the day of judgment. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow our hearts to be pure. That's all I had to say for today. Inshallah, the next few weeks I'm going to go more into the doors to the heart, how shaitan's going to attack you, stuff like that. Today's was a bit shorter, but the next few weeks are going to be a bit longer because there's more material to cover.